Well, thank you, Rob, for the opportunity and the invitation. And welcome to those near and far. This is nice to be here at the Pohle Colloquium again. I believe this is my first time since before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So this talk will concern Mary Winston. Who, you ask, is Mary Winston? I don't know, maybe some of you have heard of her or not, but she was the first American woman to receive a Ph.D. in Germany. Well, actually, she was the first one to receive one in Europe, if you wanted to say more generally. PhDs in the 19th century in the United States, there were limited opportunities for both men and women. So prior to her going to Germany, many men had gone to study with Felix Klein at Göttingen, or some went to Leipzig also. And because this offered a more challenging, richer experience in grad school. And so, but for women, it was even fewer opportunities. And so that Mary Winston, along with one other woman I'll mention who was English, were the first women to work with Felix Klein. So this is a picture of Mary Winston. She's actually Mary Winston Newson. Newson is her married name. Since most of this talk will concern the time period up to and including her PhD, I'll generally refer to her as Mary Winston. Now, I also will mention no one who knew her would understand who's Mary Winston. She was universally known as May Winston, but I'll call her Mary since I don't know her personally. So here is a map showing her very peripatetic career. She was born in Forston, Illinois, which is roughly, I guess nowadays, an hour west of Chicago. I'm sure it was a longer trip back then. Her undergraduate experience was at University of Wisconsin. Then after she got her undergraduate degree, she taught for 2 years at Downer College, which I suspect none of you have heard of. It was a women's college in Wisconsin. They later merged with Milwaukee College to become Milwaukee Downer College, and then they folded sometime in the 60s. But then so Downer College, as I said, was a women's college. It was a 4-year school, but Mary Winston, and other women too, but Mary Winston showed that she had to make a choice in life to just accept being maybe a high school teacher or a teacher at a small women's college, or to try to advance in mathematics, to aim higher. So she applied and obtained a fellowship to Bryn Mawr, stayed there a year, and then she applied for a fellowship at University of Chicago, stayed there a year, and then with Felix Klein's urging, applied for a fellowship to Göttingen. And then after 3 years, or 4 years, actually depends on how you count things, she obtained her PhD. And then after obtaining her PhD, she became the chair of the department at Kansas State, which is not quite as impressive as it sounds because she was the department, but she was the chair of it too. Then she got married, and like many women of that time period, she stopped working. Then her husband, Henry Newson, was a mathematician who taught at University of Kansas. He died suddenly so the marriage was 1900, he died suddenly in 1910, and so suddenly she has to think about going back to work to make money. Her family was not well off at all, but not poor, I guess you'd say middle class. So she went to become the head of the department at Washburn College. Then a controversy happened there, which I'll mention later. Then she went to Eureka College and stayed there for the rest of her career. By the way, this jumping around like this was not unusual for women at that time, because trying to get, first of all, an opportunity, but an opportunity that was that had the possibility of advancement was very difficult. Okay, so let me talk about three pioneers who precede Mary Winston. But presumably all of you have heard of Sofia Kovalevskaya, a Russian woman who was very talented at mathematics. If you want to just consider women mathematicians, certainly one of the greatest of all time. She wanted to pursue graduate studies. That was literally impossible in Russia. So she thought of Germany, because Germany was kind of the high point of mathematics in the world at that time. So she went to, she sent letters to many different people at colleges across Germany. The only one who showed any interest in working with her was Karl Weierstrass, the great German mathematician. And even he tested her to see like how much talent did she actually have in mathematics. But then he saw that she was quite talented. He worked with her. She completed work equivalent to the work, a thesis for a PhD. The only problem is he was at the University of Berlin. University of Berlin did not admit women. So he played a subterfuge. He got, I'm not sure how, but he got Göttingen. This is before Klein went to Göttingen. He got Göttingen to agree to give Kovalevskaya a PhD in absentia. So as far as I know, she literally never set foot on the campus of Göttingen, but she was awarded a PhD. So she was the first woman to be awarded a PhD. By the way, you might say, what about like Sophie Germain or Maria Agnesi? They were outsiders in the mathematical community. They never really had an accepted academic position. So Kovalevskaya was really the first to be part of the establishment, so to speak. But even that, the only job she could find was at the University of Stockholm. And she stayed there for the rest of her life. Relatively short life, you can see. She died at the age of 41. An even sadder story is, in my opinion, Christine Ladd Franklin. So she went to Vassar for undergrad, and then she wanted to pursue graduate studies in mathematics. J.J. Sylvester had just recently come over from England to teach at Hopkins, and so she thought of working with him. I don't think she had any prior connection to Sylvester, but Sylvester was interested, and so he played this rather clever trick. He had her fill out a scholarship form application, and so submitted it. The only thing is, when it came to the name, her name was C. Ladd, meaning that the administration had no idea that she was a woman. So they were not happy to find out that she was a woman in the administration, but their greater motivation was to keep Sylvester happy, because he was really like a crown jewel at the university. And so they made the arrangement. Yes, she can come and sit in on classes as long as they're the classes that you teach. And so I think they did relax that requirement at some point. But she completed the work needed for a PhD in 1882. At that point, Hopkins said, that's interesting, but we don't admit women. So she did everything necessary for her PhD, but did not receive the PhD until Hopkins had their 50th anniversary of their founding in 1926. And I don't know, someone that probably had the bright idea, well, wouldn't it look good for us to give this woman, Christine Ladd Franklin, by the way, she married Fabian Franklin, who was also a student of Sylvester. So they awarded her the PhD, if you look at the time dates, 44 years after she completed the PhD. So she was 79 at the time. So I would have told Hopkins where to shove the PhD, but she was nicer than I was. She never worked in mathematics. She became a psychologist, in fact. My third pioneer, Charlotte Scott, who probably of all these three had the most successful career. She worked with the great Arthur Cayley at Cambridge. Cambridge also had a rule that women were not admitted. I don't think Cambridge allowed women, at least for graduate school, until after World War II. But again, Cayley played a subterfuge and got the University of London to agree. They didn't award PhDs. The Doctor of Science was their terminal degree. And then Charlotte Scott afterwards came to the United States and became the head of the math department at Bryn Mawr. She actually was the first math professor at Bryn Mawr. So here's the list of the American women who got PhDs in mathematics prior to marrying Winston. So Winifred Edgerton, who again you may not have heard of, was the first recipient of a PhD from Columbia. She ended up teaching high school in Westchester County. Ida Metcalf, she ended up being a statistician for the New York City Department of Finance. Ruth Gentry, who you'll hear about again, she did teach high school, but she had a lot of health problems, so she died fairly young. Annie McKinnon, who married, she was briefly professor of math at Wells College, which is, I don't know if Wells College still exists. Does anyone know that? But they were a small women's college in upstate New York. Then she married a math professor at Hamilton College, Fitch. I don't remember his first name. And she stopped working at that point. Agnes Baxter, after she got her PhD, she became a computer for the Naval Observatory. Computer back then meant someone that computes things. And then she became a book editor for a publishing company. Notice there's a trend here. They didn't do a lot in mathematics. Again, very limited opportunities. Charlotte Barnum, wait, what did Charlotte Barnum do? She didn't do, she didn't teach any mathematics. I'm forgetting what she did do. If I remember, I'll say again. Isabel Madison, I find sad, but she might not have found her life sad. After she got her PhD, she became the secretary of the president of Bryn Mawr, M. Carey Thomas, who's a fairly famous American educator. And then Elizabeth Dickerman became an editor for Literary Review. Charlotte, that's right. Charlotte Barnum married, no, that was Agnes Baxter also. Let me go back to Agnes Baxter. She married this guy named Hill, I don't remember his first name, but he was a fairly well-known educator also. He became president of the University of Cincinnati. So this is the main street, which is practically the only street in Forest in Illinois. So Mary Winston was homeschooled. Her mother especially was very, wanted her children to get a better education than was possible in Forest. And so she studied Latin and Greek when she was young. Here's her family, her parents, Thomas and Caroline, known as Carrie. Everyone in this family had nicknames. Well, Edward's nickname was Ed. Thomas's nickname was Win. Ambrose's nickname was Perry. If you know why that would be, that you're pretty, that would be pretty impressive. Ambrose Perret was a famous surgeon in the 1500s. And Thomas Winston was himself a surgeon. He served in the Civil War. The younger siblings, Eugenia, always known as Jean, Charles known as Charlie, and they ran out of nicknames. Alice had no nickname as far as I know. She was just Alice. One thing I found interesting about doing the research for this, so Mary Winston's life, she died in 1959. So her life and mine overlap. Her father was born in 1829. That's 2 steps back in terms of people to 1829. That's kind of mind-blowing. This is a very strong family. It was very moving reading letters from this family. I went to Smith College. They have a collection of Mary Winston's letters. A letter she wrote to her brother at the age of 11. Physical geography, Latin, and geometry. The latter being the most important. Mama says that if she would let me, I would study geometry all the time. I don't think I would do that, but I do like geometry. We have finished the first book. I don't think that's the first book of Euclid. It's some geometry book for children, presumably. I have done nearly all original proofs in it. So she went to University of Wisconsin in 1884. That's the age of 15. That wasn't that unusual back then for people younger than today's college kids. This is not a picture of Mary Winston. This is a picture of a dorm room in a woman's dorm room in the late 1800s. I added it to this because that's an amazing dorm room. Look at the drapes and all the furniture, and I think these are Valentine's Day cards. It looks like them. So Mary Winston did not major in math because that wasn't a thing you could major in back then. They only had 4 majors. The ancient classical course was one of the majors. That was basically Latin and Greek, but I'll show you the courses in a while. She graduated in 1889. You say, oh, it took her 5 years to graduate. The family ran out of money before she could start her sophomore year, so she went and taught high school at the age of 16, which is also interesting. Made a little money and then went back to Wisconsin. The classical course prescribed the courses that you take in the first 2 years, but was completely elective as far as the final 2 years. So she actually didn't get a degree in math, but she had an honors thesis in math. The math department at Wisconsin at the time only had 2 people in it, Charles Van Veltzer and Charles Schlichter, who together wrote many like college level textbooks. You can still find books by Van Veltzer and Schlichter. Here is, I won't go through this in detail, but here is the courses in the first 2 years for the ancient classical course. Latin, Greek, there's math as algebra, solid geometry, trig, where are we? Analytic geometry, more analytic geometry, and then finally calculus at the end of the sophomore year. In addition, there was Anglo-Saxon, early English. Not quite sure what the difference is between Anglo-Saxon and early English, but they studied both. And then they had what they call special advanced electives, like...
Presumably early English would be then what we call Middle English?
Maybe. It could be that, so does Chaucer count for them? Did they count Chaucer in early English? Which they did, if I went through back to that, they did actually study Chaucer.
Well, then that's Middle English.
Correct. So elliptic functions, theory of numbers. These are advanced courses that are occasionally offered. So I don't have Mary Winston's transcript, but presumably she took some of these courses. Then she took this teaching position at Downer College. This is Downer College. Probably this whole, that building there is the entirety of Downer College, I expect, other than maybe dorms. So letters that she wrote from home in Fox Lake. No, I've not been stuck on the arithmetic yet. It was only that the class did not do as they ought and made pretty bad work of the examination at the middle of the term. So teachers complaining about students, that's been going on forever. You can probably find Pythagoras complaining about his students if the thing still exists. A sort of bridges of Königsberg problem, except that I don't understand the problem, but I'll mention it. Mr. Sawyer, this is to her mother, Mr. Sawyer, the congregational minister of whom I think I have spoken before, stopped me and propounded, is that the right word, the following problem. What is the length of the longest plank that can be placed flat on a floor of a room 16 feet by 12, the board to be 12 inches wide? It seems that it went the rounds of Fox Lake, which is where Downer College was located, last winter, and no one could get it. Well, I can't get it either. The room is 16 by 12 feet, so isn't the longest plank 16 feet? So obviously I'm...
No, what about diagonal? The whole point is that you put it
Oh,
on the diagonal, but you have to
so
count the width.
I was just thinking of, well, if you put planks in a floor, the way you always lay them out. But yes, that makes sense that would be how you want to do it. And the width complicates it. And in fact, that the room is not square complicates it. So yeah, so there you go. Try to solve it. So Mary Winston was able to solve it, but she said, well, the solution seems too complicated. And so she thought that she maybe missed the simpler solution. Okay. Then to her brother, Pohle, I still maintain that bookkeeping is not mathematics. I have to teach it, for none of the other teachers have it any more than I have. Again, teachers complaining about their schedule, nothing new there. Then she was constantly giving advice to Jean, who was her younger sister. When you are a fellow of the University of Wisconsin, you will have to be more sedate. In my character as a teacher in Downer College, I scarcely ever speak to a man. Obviously reprimanding her sister for I don't know, for speaking to a man, or maybe a particular kind of man. And then this we don't know who it's to because there's no front page to the letter. I do not think I shall want to come back, this is Downer College again, next year. I cannot bear to be here under false pretenses, that's her spelling of pretenses, and sometimes feel as I was. They want the teachers to take over an active part in religious matters in the YWCA. So Downer College was not technically a religious college, but they had a strong religious affiliation with the Congregational Church. And Mary had, this is not the only time, in several letters, complained about having to take the young ladies to church, to have to sit through Sunday school with them, so that wasn't for her. I don't think I'm pretty sure she wasn't an atheist, but she showed no religious sentiment in any of the letters I've read of hers. Then she wanted to get out of Downer, so she applied to there's a fellowship for graduate study at Bryn Mawr that was available. She lost out to Ruth Gentry, who I had mentioned earlier. So this was so Ruth Gentry got a fellowship to Bryn Mawr 1890-91 academic year. Here's the Congregational Church that I was talking about. Then in the next year, 91-92, Mary Winston did win a fellowship. This is the Maypole tradition, which I don't know if they still do this at Bryn Mawr, but it was obviously looking through history of Bryn Mawr, a big thing. They still do it.
My wife is an alumna. They've been doing it at least since she was there, yes.
Oh, well, they've been doing it since the college was founded. I didn't seem like that much that interesting, but you know, it's part of their tradition. So here's what what she studied in her year at Bryn Mawr. Modern analytical geometry, 3 hours per week plus 2 hours seminary with Charlotte Scott. Then analysis, 2 hours per week with James Harkness, who was a Canadian-American mathematician, somewhat well-known. Then physics, 5 hours lecture and 4 hours lab. This is per week. That's a lot of physics. With Arthur Stanley Mackenzie, who also was Canadian. So you can see Bryn Mawr did not just have women professors. They had a mixture of men and women professors. So when she was at Bryn Mawr, she writes her brother, this is the first semester she was there. I've been out of school for 2 years with no, because she's at Downer College, with no study in advanced mathematics and have been industriously forgetting what I had. She did. succeed in the end. So come time in 1892, she had to decide to do a second year or apply for a second year at Bryn Mawr. But she heard of the University of Chicago. You say, well, everyone's heard of it. 1892 was the first year of University of Chicago. The reason she even thought of it is her father brought it up because her father and mother were thinking of moving to Chicago. Her father had seen them building the university. If you don't know, it's stunning how this came about. John D. Rockefeller gave enormous sums of money, even sums that are big by our standards. It's unimaginable by their standards. By the way, this is after Mary Winston had left Chicago, but this is the oldest picture I could see. This is a commencement address in 1894. I was going to ask you, but it seems like an unfair question. Does anybody recognize who's giving the address? You can't see him very well. It's Albert Michelson, the famous physicist who later won Nobel Prize.
Michelson and Morley?
Yep. Now, also what's interesting is you can't see faces all that well, but looking through the crowd, I couldn't find any women. So it's not that Chicago said, we should invite as many women as possible. Obviously, Mary Newton was an exception. Mary Winston, rather, at that time. So here are some of the grad courses she would have taken. So the math department, the part that's famous even to this day, E.H. Moore, Oscar Bolza, and Heinrich Maschke. Three great mathematicians were the heart and soul of the math department. There were some other instructors, but they offered a wide variety of courses: algebraic surfaces, functions of a complex variable. Let's see, Bolza taught that. Differential equations, Moore taught that. Modern analytic geometry, Maschke taught that. So things are pretty good at Chicago. She probably could have stayed and gotten a Ph.D., but something happened to get her over to Germany. So some of you probably know this. The very first International Mathematical Congress was held in 1893 in Chicago. They say, that's weird, why did they do that? This is because there's a World's Fair in Chicago at that time. It was in conjunction with the World's Fair. And the star of the International Congress was Felix Klein. Well, Hilbert submitted a paper. He didn't attend in person, but he had a paper read at the Congress. Then after the Congress, Felix Klein gave a series of lectures called the Evanston Colloquium, so at Northwestern. And Mary Winston actually not only met Klein, but she acted as the recorder of the lectures at the Evanston Colloquium. So here's a picture of not all, but some of the attendees at the Mathematical Congress. Mary Winston is absent, but I think minor personages were not present in this picture. I don't know the names of all these people, because first of all, they all look alike. They all have beards, and they're just, some of them are a little older. Here's Felix Klein in the middle, James Oliver, the chair of the Cornell Math Department, William Story, the chair of the Clark University Math Department, which was one of the best math departments in the United States at the time. This, I believe, is E.H. Moore. You might say that doesn't look like E.H. Moore, because we primarily know E.H. Moore from pictures taken 20 years after this. So I'm pretty sure that's E.H. Moore. There's Edward Studi, a German mathematician. This is the cutoff, but this is John van Vleck, who taught at Wesleyan. His grandson won the Nobel Prize in physics. This is that's one thing I don't like about this. Like, oh, there, I can move it sort of. Yeah. Henry Turner Eddy, looking up at the skies. He was the president of Rose-Hulman. Well, actually, the Hulmans had not yet given money, so he was the president of Rose. This for sure is Bolza and Mashka, except that it might be the other way around. They both are balding and have a goatee. So I have to admit that might not be correct. So Mary Winston became familiar with lots of well-known mathematicians at that time. Wait. There. So there was a college alumni, Association of College Alumni, which is nowadays the AAUW, American Association of University Women. They gave an annual European fellowship. They would give up, I think, up to 5 in a year, which give $500 for study abroad, which may not seem like a lot, but that actually was sufficient for people to go to Europe to study. Christine Ladd Franklin actually was chaired the committee. The first recipient of the fellowship was Louisa Holman Richardson, who was not a mathematician. She was a classicist. Ruth Gentry was the first woman to receive the fellowship to study abroad. So it was like throughout the first years of their career, Mary Winston was like shadowing what Ruth Gentry did. I don't think that was intentional. I think it just happened that way. Here is a picture of Louisa Holman Richardson. She also died very young, unfortunately. She was a fairly important figure in her field. Then Ruth Gentry went to, with a fellowship, went to Berlin to study. So here's a couple of comments interesting by her. In America, I'd heard that a woman was occasionally permitted, as an exceptional favor, to become a sort of supposed to be invisible guest in lectures in some universities of Germany. That in Berlin, however, all effort to secure such exceptional privilege would be utterly useless. So she actually tried to contact every university in Germany. No one would have her, but she did meet with Lazarus Fuchs, who was at University of Berlin. Fuchs had some sympathy because he went through trials and tribulations of his own. He was Jewish at a time where Jews were not allowed to be professors in the German university system. So he had two choices. Teach at like a gymnasium, the high school, or convert to Christianity. He admitted it was a very difficult decision for him, but he really wanted to have a job at university, to be able to produce mathematics, so he converted. But I suspect that made him have sympathy for what Ruth Gentry was going through. There was no conversion that she could do that would make her acceptable. But he was, as I said, sympathetic. He did not make me feel that a woman possessed of interest in mathematics was a sort of natural curiosity whose existence demanded explanation. That's the way the world was in the late 1800s. So, Mary, going back to Mary Winston now, she did receive a fellowship from Christine Ladd Franklin, and Christine Ladd Franklin personally gave her an additional $500. And then she went to study with Felix Klein. The only problem, Klein kept saying, no, come on over. The only problem is Klein had not received permission to have women study at Göttingen. But Klein felt that he had enough prestige that he could, get the, I guess it's the rector. In the university system of Germany back then, the rector was sort of like the provost, but he answered back to Berlin. So you had to convince, for any policy change, you had to convince the rector. Another thing that helped, I think there was a change in rector. So the new person, I think, liked Klein, and so agreed. Let me make sure I'm not going to. When do I have to stop?
You got started at about 4:10, so you should stop by 5.
Okay, fine. Letters of recommendation. So this is from Bolsa, who was the professor at Chicago. So he knew Mary Winston personally. Miss Mary F. Winston, F is for Francis, has attended my graduate courses at the University of Chicago during the year 1893, and I have great pleasure in testifying to the high opinion I have of her abilities as a mathematician. She not only combines clearness and quickness of apprehension and perseverance, lots of perseverance, but also shows decided talent for research. He also, in a different letter, he said, she was the best student in our graduate program. They only had 5, but so that was a very nice recommendation by Bolsa. I don't think I put it here, but Mashka also sent in a letter recommendation. Here's a recommendation from E.H. Moore. Mathematically, she is of clear and vigorous thinking, well poised with a wide acquaintance with the literature of modern mathematics. She has excellent pedagogical characteristics. I'm not sure what he means by it, that she would be a good teacher or that she listens to the teacher. I'm not sure. I recommend her very highly and with much pleasure for the position in question, being firmly convinced that she would make a high success and at once win the marked esteem of colleagues and students. Yeah, this is 19th century. People wrote better. And then Felix Klein himself, which is a little odd because Mary Winston was already in Göttingen at the time, so I think that this is maybe a renewal of the scholarship. So Felix Klein writes, during the winter semester, she took part in my lectures and exercises with great diligence and good results. So I do not hesitate to recommend her for the European Fellowship of the American Association of Collegiate Alumni. So now, Klein at this time period had 5 PhD students. He called them Das Pentagon. The names are down here, but you can't read them very well, so I'll read them off. Upper left is French Charles Jacotet. Of these 5, he was probably achieved the least. Then the Danish topologist Paul Hegard in the middle of the top row. Then Fano, Gino Fano, the well-known Italian geometer at the right. Mary Winston in the letters home talks about Gino Fano as a little man. He seems like you can't really tell for sure, but he does seem like he's kind of short. This is Mary Winston, and then this is the other woman who was studying at the same time as Mary Winston, who started at the same time, Grace Chisholm, English mathematician. She later married, W.H. Young? Young. So she's known as she's known as Grace Chisholm Young frequently.
Florence's mother.
So yes. Grace Chisholm and Mary Winston became close friends, not surprisingly, because they were alone in a sea of men at Göttingen. A pretty stressful PhD program. I'll explain why in a moment. Then 2 other Americans came after Mary Winston and overlap with her because there's this picture. Anna Johnson and Annie McKinnon, who I mentioned before. I think Anna Johnson never finished a PhD. And Annie McKinnon got her PhD in the United States, but she came for some additional training. So, people were terrified of Klein. Not because Klein was a bad person. I think Klein was a very good person. But Klein made all of his PhD students give seminars. Not like a class, not get up in class and give a seminar. Give seminars to the math department at Göttingen, which I did as a grad student at Syracuse. And I can say that was terrifying because the professors, not just my thesis advisor was there, but other professors. And so you just feel exposed. So that's Pentagon that I showed before. They're all terrified of giving a seminar. So Mary Winston was the first woman to give such a seminar, not surprisingly. Let's see if I can move these people out of the way so you can see. Wait. There. So the title of her seminar, Die Zusammensformeln für die Hauptzweige der Pi-Function. The connection formulas for the main branch of the P function. Which is now Weierstrass's contribution to elliptic functions and elliptic curves. This seminar, well, you can't really read it, but I'll just point out, if I can find it, Bolza is named somewhere here. I'm losing it looking, there's Bolza. This seminar is undated, but it was given between one that was given in December 5th, 93, and January 9th, 94. But I would say most likely it was given in sometime December 1893. The seminars occurred on a Tuesday invariably, and they're generally every week if there was someone who was prepared for it. Here's other, Klein called them Vorträge lectures. So Mary Winston altogether gave 4 such Vorträge, and these are the other 3 that she gave. Ordinary spherical functions in the special case of the hypergeometric function. These other 2, I don't know what they are, on the concept of a function. And Chebyshev's general theory, didn't say general theory of what, just says general theory. I don't think that would have been, we think of Chebyshev doing probability. I don't think it was that. So the people I showed before, here's the number of lectures they gave. Jacquetet, actually, who achieved the least, gave the most lectures of 5. But notice Heegard only gave 1 lecture. Fano gave 2 lectures. Grace Chisholm gave 4 lectures, but she waited for Mary Winston to begin. So in 1896, well, she completed her thesis, is probably more correct, in 1896. Über den hermitischen Fall der Lamischen Differentialgleichungen, on the Hermitian case of what's usually called Lamé's equation. If you don't know Lamé's equation, here it is. It's a second derivative equation of a function of a complex variable. It also has Weierstrass's P function as part of the equation. So she was awarded a Ph.D. magna cum laude in 1897. You say, but didn't she write her thesis in 1896? Yes, but literally took a full year to get a publisher who could figure out how to use print up all these math symbols. I suspect the Weierstrass P function caused special problems. So I didn't look to see if you could find her thesis. I'll just mention in passing, also when she was at Göttingen, she published an article kind of on these same topics in the Mathematische Annalen, which was a top flight journal. Then, coming back to the United States, she was appointed head of the Kansas State math department, married University of Kansas mathematician Henry Byron Newson, quit her position at Kansas State, had 3 children, fairly close together. Then, what she's probably most famous for mathematically, other than just getting the PhD, she was the first, and I think actually the only English translation of Hilbert's problems. It was Hilbert gave her permission to do that. Hilbert and Winston knew each other. Hilbert came to Göttingen while Mary Winston was still there. And this was published in the Bulletin of the AMS in 1902. You can look it up. Henry Newson, her husband, who was a math professor at Kansas, if I didn't say that, died in 1910. Here's the only photo I know of Henry Newson. It's him on the left. His brother, I don't even know his brother's name, on the right. This is not Mary Winston. This is Jean, her sister, and this is her oldest daughter, Caroline. Some of you may be better at this than me. Looking at this picture, could you guess how old this young girl would be?
About 3 or
Okay, so that would make it 1904, 1905. The picture is not dated. Then she becomes the head of the math department at Washburn College. She resigns in 1921. Why did she resign? The history professor, this was a big cause celeb, J.E. Kirkpatrick, was fired in 1919 for pro-union activity. Not even on campus. He was kind of a union organization was a big thing back in the early 1900s. So the president of the college did not appreciate or approve of such activity. By the way, you might say, well, okay, so she resigned. It took her 2 years to resign. There's a story to that. So technically he was resigned, he was fired in 1919, but he was allowed to stay at Washburn College while there was an investigation that took place. The investigation ended in 1921, affirming the firing of Kirkpatrick. He then went to Harvard, which shows that maybe the president of Washburn was not on the right side of things. Then she taught at Eureka College for the rest of her career. Here's one of her early students. Anyone recognize who that person is? That's Ronald Reagan. Now, I'd like to get his transcript to see how he did in math.
And you know that he was in at least one of her classes?
Well, again, I think at first she was the only math professor. So if he took math, it would have been with her.
Yeah, but maybe he placed out, right? I mean, he's a smart guy.
You're right. You're right. The Gipper. Okay, so in 1940, this is my last slide. She was honored at the Women's Centennial Congress, which was in 1840. There was an anti-slavery Congress in London where there's large women participation. So after retirement, she moved to Maryland to be near Caroline, who we saw as a young girl. She died in 1959, one day after her beloved brother died. Her children, after her death, started a annual lecture called the Mary Winston Newson Memorial Lecture on International Relations at Eureka College. I have no further information of, wait, she's a mathematician. Why did she want a lecture on international relations? Apparently she had a strong interest in that. Okay, so yes, that's the end of my talk.
Nice.
Thank you.
I noticed that a number of times in the lecture, Bryn Mawr came up, even
Right.
though it was not central to your talk in general. But it's kind of stuck in my head, and I thought to myself, well, for some of the major colleges like Chicago and Johns Hopkins, we know about their origin stories. Wealthy person, forward-looking, intellectual.
Right.
What was it that made Bryn Mawr so eminent, so to speak, in mathematics?
I think I can answer that, even though this is sort of a guess, but I think it's a good guess. The president of Bryn Mawr, M. Carey Thomas, was a very powerful woman, and she, I think, maybe not at first, because I don't know what her interest in math was, but when she hired Charlotte Scott and realized, wait, I have someone really strong here, I should keep her. And so then I think that just naturally led to math being not privileged, but at least given some attention at Bryn Mawr. And of course, later on, Emmy Noether comes to Bryn Mawr. That's an interesting story, but another story.
What got you interested in this subject?
I'm doing research with Walter and Joe on so all these people that went from the United States to study in Germany came back. They had huge influence on the curriculum of colleges in the United States. And so we've been trying to study that. Mary Winston probably isn't the primary person, but her story interested me. So in fact, Walter and Joe will perhaps remember this. we contacted different colleges that we knew had people that came back from Germany to try to get catalogs, to try to analyze the catalogs. So I contacted Washburn, and the archivist at Washburn mentioned, oh, did you happen to know that Mary Winston resigned, and gave me some of the details of that. I thought, that's an interesting story. So I started investigating her further.
Other questions? Yes, Joe.
So did Mary Winston publish things other than her thesis?
She published a couple of math education things. So she was like a lifetime member of MAA. Well, not lifetime, because MAA didn't exist, but whenever MAA started, she was a longtime member of MAA. And so what information I found about her being at meetings, she would talk about math education. So after she translated Hilbert's problems, I don't think she did any original math after that I'm aware of.
Any other questions for Larry? Well, let's thank him Oh, any questions from out there in Zoom land? No. Okay. Thank you, Larry. It was a wonderful talk.
Thank you.